Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pocket Coach. I'm Anthony Crane, and today's experiment is the sprint retrospective. Now, again, hold on. You can go to an AI and ask it how to run a retrospective. It'll give you a great answer. So we're not going to cover basics here. We're going to talk about the things that I think are less obvious, things that we've learned over time, not the stuff that you would get from, looking up the how-to stuff. So I'm going to start the 5-minute timer, and let's see where we get. So first off, the problem we're trying to solve is that our teams are not perfect and they should always be striving to become better than they were. And also sometimes things don't go well and we want to talk about how we can prevent that in the future. So that's the problem we're solving. Hypothesis is that if every sprint we talk about how we're doing, we can absolutely improve as a team. Even high performing teams can do this. In fact, oddly, one thing we've learned, high performing teams do this more often. They're the ones who are most likely to do the retro, whereas the teams who are actually kind of our struggling teams, they're the ones who also don't do retrospectives. It's like, why bother? So I find that very interesting. Typical outcomes, all your team KPIs should be going up from your retrospectives, especially engagement. And skill growth, in other words, what do you got to do to check off this experiment? You've led a sprint retro, you've used power of all voices techniques. There's lots of those, like using Miro. You've added stories to the sprint. So this is a huge lesson. Too many teams do a retro, and then all they do is complain. You need to create tickets to represent the changes, the improvements you're going to make. And basically, your retro should lead to one of two things. Either an improvement story on your board, or a change to a working or a creation of a working agreement. So you're either going to create working agreements or you're going to create experiments. That's it. Two things: working agreements, experiments. And this whole kit is all about experiments. So honestly, this whole kit came from retrospectives. That's how powerful retrospectives can be. So you've then implemented those stories and then measured the effectiveness quantitatively or qualitatively. Quantitatively, you have metrics, or qualitatively, you've discussed it and talked about whether or not you really believe that the experiment is helping. So that's what it takes to really do a retro, is to have either the working agreements or the stories. My shirt today, I don't know. It's before I started looking for the names of the shirts, so unknown. I call it rainbow stripes. All right, let's get into the materials. So there's a lot of materials that I have in the kit for this. We have an overview of the practice itself. Again, that's the rookie stuff. I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'm only going to show you the stuff that's unusual. Dedicated teams, we often struggle with dedicated teams. So here's a solution that we came up with for that, because we do a retro, right? And then there's a self-evaluation guide. Another thing is, how do agile teams evaluate themselves? Because you're not supposed to have performance reviews anymore, right? If you haven't heard, there's plenty of books. Go ahead and go to Amazon and search for abolish performance reviews, right? And you'll see all kinds of books, including one by that very name. Performance reviews are not solving the problem that they were intended to solve. So list out what the real problem is, come up with a better solution. Anyway, so team self-evaluation would be one way to allow people to improve without it being top down, without it being an outsider telling you. All right, so let's take a look at some of these. I'm just going to show you some of my favorite things here. So one, this is our little retrospective practice. The first thing is key. Most teams have their scrum lead the retro every time. Don't do that. Rotate. This time I'll lead it. Next time you'll lead it. So by rotating the retrospective, you're going to increase team ownership of improvement. Okay, you can't have the scrum lead do this every time. I have a little guide of 3 different ways to do retros, and the first one I call it the OG, the original. If some people don't realize that OG stands for original gangster, but OG stands for the original. So if you've never done them before, use the OG. If you've done them before, then maybe use one of the other ones. If your retros are getting stale beyond the OG and after the first, you might try topic focused, or there's a great book called Agile Retrospectives, Derby and Larson. Great book. And I'll tell you how we use that book in some of our teams as well. And then you create a candidate agenda based on the style you've picked. Don't forget to create either, working agreement or stories, right? It says actions here. I should actually, I'll just do it right now. Create create working agreements, because you might be adjusting them, or stories from your retrospective. And then throughout the sprint, you should have some kind of way of seeing. And by the way, in our sprint retro, we show off in our sprint review, we show off the retro items and whether we succeeded or failed. to our stakeholders, and they love it. They love seeing how much we're trying to improve. They start to trust us and believe in us because they see us trying to get better. Furthermore, sometimes they see a great idea and they bring it to other teams that they're also stakeholders of. So demonstrate in your sprint review, demonstrate your retrospective tickets, your stories. Okay, so that's pretty much our first 5 minutes. For the rest of, so I'm going to do a second 5, and in it, I'm just going to talk about some of these other, the retrospective guide, which is those other ways to do retros, and then 2 of those ideas that we've implemented. So if you were interested, stick around. Otherwise, I hope you found the video useful, but we are going to go a little deeper. All right, so next up, there is this retrospective guide that we created. So for this one, if you're a brand new team, you do the OG. If you're an advanced team, then you might move on from there. So the OG is simply what went right, what went wrong, yada, yada. You've probably heard of that one. If not, you can pause and read it. And then if it's your first time doing this, you won't have any historical ones. After the first time, you're going to have historical problems that you've solved. In the next retro, you should look at least the ones that you picked to ask, did we achieve them? And again, you should actually cover those in the sprint retrospective. So you can pause to read the agenda there. The next one is topic focus. So eventually, if your retros start to not produce tickets and it starts to not produce new working agreements, come up with just pick one of these iteration results, ceremonies, which by the way, no one calls them that anymore. So let's change that to agile events. Okay, that's and I'll just put ceremonies in here because a lot of people don't know what that means. Ceremonies. Okay. Recurring issues that we've been facing, missing metrics, defect prevention, right? So there's all these different things. Also, you can go to my library in my app and pick random experiments out of that and talk about whether that should be a good experiment or not. That could be topic focused. Okay, so that's another way. And then finally, there's this great Agile Retrospectives book, and in it they talk about a very much complicated agenda 1 through 5, and they talk to you how to do it. But what we did was we sort of just listed out all the techniques that apply to these sections, and then we didn't actually follow this because it felt too big for us for a sprint retro. This might be good for a quarterly retro. But for a sprint retro, what we did is we rotate who's going to lead it next time. And so I'm like, okay, I'll lead it next time. And you know what? I'm going to figure out what this color dots red green events is, or I'm going to figure out what triple nickels is, right? So you then read the book and you read that section. And then in the next retro, you bring that game in. So again, don't do this when you're new at retros. If the retros are getting stale, if topic focus isn't generating topics, then try some of these alternative ways. And there's one that I learned from this that I use all the time now. And it's ESVP, which I don't see. Oh, there it is, ESVP. I use this so often. So if you haven't learned ESVP, Explorer, Shopper, Vacationer, Prisoner, it's one of my favorite techniques I got from the book. So there's that. The next thing I want to show you is 2 of the things that we did. So one of them was commitment. People were not committed enough to the team sometimes in some of our teams. So one group did this. They created an Excel spreadsheet, and they literally, when you came in, if you were on time, you get 100 points. If you're late but very engaged, you get 80 points. And so you can see this whole scale. And then at the end of each sprint, they would see their score, and their goal was to make the score go up sprint by sprint. So a quantitative way to kind of do that around a qualitative idea. Even easier than that, another team, once they heard about this, they're like, well, you know what? They just made a coffee cup. This was back when we were face-to-face and not remote. But you could easily mimic this in Miro or Mural. They would put a coffee can out, and they had stacks of different colored poker chips. If you're on time, you get to pick a green chip off the stack and throw it in the can. If you missed altogether, then we would put a black chip in for you. If you missed, but we knew you were missing, right at the beginning, we just throw a red chip in for you. If you were late, if you were distracted, or if you were coming in and out a lot, we'd throw a yellow chip in for you. And then if you were highly engaged, regardless of the other 4, if you were highly engaged, we threw in a blue chip. And what we wanted to see is tons of blue chips, right? So at the end of each sprint, we would look and count up how many of these chips we had, and then in our retrospective, talk about how do we make it better. So that was a really fun way. Finally, team self-evaluation. So this one's a pretty exciting technique. Again, you have to have a good environment of trust to make this work. Basically, if there's 5 people on your team, everybody gets a point, and you can assign a point to someone else, right? So you get 4 points if there's 5 people. So you get 1 less point than there are people. If there's a team of 10, you would have 9 points. That'd be a big team. So you have a team of 5, you would have 4 points. If you felt all 4 of your teammates, so you don't ever point yourself, if you think your 4 teammates were equal in their impact to the sprint or to the quarter, however often you want to do this, you give them each 1, 1, 1, 1. And so that's basically like not voting. It's like, yep, you guys are all awesome teammates. I'm just going to put a 1 for everybody. But if you were like, man, Marianne was like a superstar this sprint, you could give her 1.5 points or 1.5 points, or you give her 2 points, right? And now you only have 2 points left to divide amongst the 3 remaining people. And then you could go equal, equal, equal. So the idea is at the end, you add up everybody's points, and your superstars that everyone seems to think are superstars are going to get more points than everybody else, even though it's fractions. And those people who are contributing the least will get the lowest score. And that might feel icky, but then it's a chance to say, okay, I'm getting the lowest score here. What can I do to make my score better? So that's just another example of how you can use retrospectives to identify a problem on your team and then create a story to solve it, and then maybe even share those solutions with other teams. And now other teams can reuse your amazing ideas. So this is just a small sample of what we do with our retros. There's so many more stories I could tell, but that's it. 10 minutes is plenty. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. My name is Anthony Crane. Where's my stop? My name is Anthony Crane with Pocket Coach, and we'll catch you next time.